Snow fell heavy that night, swallowing the small mountain town in silence. Thick drifts rolled across the streets, erasing familiar shapes and leaving only ghostly outlines under the dim glow of a few lonely street lamps. Roads were buried, cars abandoned, and winds howled through the night like restless spirits searching for shelter. At the edge of town, behind a leaning wooden fence and an old oak tree, stood a modest cottage. From its chimney curled a thin ribbon of smoke, the only sign of life for miles. Inside, a kind old woman named Eleanor Hayes sat beside her fire, knitting quietly. Her gray hair was pinned back, her wrinkled hands steady despite the storms. Rage outside. Eleanor had lived many winters in that house. Some had been joyful, filled with laughter from her late husband and the chatter of her children. But now, with her husband long gone and her children scattered in distant cities, the winters felt lonelier than ever. This night felt heavier still, as if the storm carried more than just snow. It carried silence. As the wind howled against her windows, Eleanor paused in her knitting. She closed her eyes, clasped her hands together, and whispered a prayer. Lord, wherever they are tonight, let them find warmth. Let no soul be lost in this cold. She had no idea how quickly that prayer would return to her. A knock shattered the quiet, loud, urgent, rattling her thin wooden door until she nearly dropped her yarn. Eleanor froze, her heart thumping in her chest. At her age, visitors in the dead of night, especially in a blizzard, were nearly unheard of. Slowly, clutching her shawl, she shuffled to the door. When she pulled it open, the breath caught in her throat. There, half buried in snow, stood 15 leather-clad men. Their jackets bore bold patches with the name feared in towns across the country, the Iron Serpents. Their beards were frosted white, their faces raw and red from the wind. Boots sank deep in the drifts, and behind them, motorcycles leaned against each other, almost swallowed by snow. For a moment, Eleanor felt her knees tremble. These were men people whispered about, rough bikers with reputations for trouble. Yet when she looked past the tattoos, the heavy jackets, and the hard eyes, she saw something else. Their lips were blue, their hands stiff, their bodies shivering violently. Whatever else they were, tonight they were just human beings fighting for survival. Eleanor did not hesitate. She opened her door wider and said simply, "Come in before you freeze." The men exchanged surprised glances. They were used to doors slamming in their faces, not opening to welcome them. But one by one they filed inside, stomping snow from their boots. The small living room filled instantly with the weight of leather and steel. Eleanor's quiet cottage suddenly felt too small for 15 men, yet warmer than any shelter they had known that night. She hurried to her kitchen, pulling out everything she could find: canned soup, bread, leftover stew. It wasn't much, but she served it with a smile, bustling about as though she had been expecting them all along. The bikers, awkward at first, sat on her floral couches and mismatched wooden chairs, their massive frames out of place in the gentle little room. They weren't used to kindness. They weren't used to being seen as men in need instead of men to fear. The storm raged louder, pounding at the windows, but inside, warmth spread. They told her bits of their story. They had been riding across states when the blizzard caught them. The highways were closed, motels were full, and with their bikes freezing solid, they had nowhere to turn. Without shelter, they wouldn't have survived the night. Eleanor listened, nodding, refilling coffee cups, draping them in spare blankets. One by one, the bikers dozed off, giants of men wrapped in quilts smelling faintly of lavender and old cedar. Their snores rumbled through the small house, but Eleanor didn't mind. She had never had sons, but tonight she felt as if she had been given 15. By dawn, the storm broke. The world outside glittered under a blanket of diamonds, sunlight reflecting off fresh snow. The bikers stirred, stretching and rubbing their eyes. Eleanor had scrambled eggs and toast waiting. When they stepped out, they found their bikes half buried but intact. Before they left, their leader, a tall man with steel-gray eyes named Duke Rowan, turned to Eleanor. "Ma'am," he said, his voice rough but sincere, "we won't forget this, ever." She patted his arm gently, smiling. "Safe travels, boys." Then, with the roar of engines, they vanished down the snowy road, leaving Eleanor alone again. She thought that was the end. Just a strange, beautiful memory of a night when her home became a haven for men the world called dangerous. But kindness has a way of returning. The next morning, as Eleanor scattered seeds for the sparrows in her yard, she heard it, a low rumble, faint at first, like distant thunder. It grew louder. The ground seemed to shake. Down the road, she saw them, bikes, not 10, not 20. 100 motorcycles stretched as far as she could see, engines growling like a storm of their own. Neighbors peeked from windows in fear, but Eleanor only clutched her shawl, breath caught in her throat. The iron serpents had returned. They parked along both sides of her street until the little house was surrounded. From the front, Duke dismounted, carrying something in his hand. This time his smile wasn't intimidating, it was warm. He handed Eleanor a bouquet of fresh flowers, impossible to find in winter. "We told the brothers what you did," he said. "Word spread. You gave us shelter when no one else would. We don't forget that." Behind him, bikers unloaded supplies, bags of groceries, firewood, blankets, tools. Some shoveled her driveway, others repaired her fence. A few fixed the squeaky hinge on her porch. Her quiet yard buzzed with life. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. For the first time in years, her house rang with laughter, clinking tools, the hum of engines, and voices filling the emptiness. By the time the sun set, her home was not just repaired, it was alive. That evening, as the bikers revved their engines in unison, saluting her, Eleanor waved from her porch. She wasn't just an old widow in a quiet house anymore. She was family now, family on two wheels, bound not by blood, but by kindness. And as their roar faded into the snowy hills, she whispered to herself, "Kindness is never wasted. It always finds its way back."